Mother's Day pause, taking a quick little break for Mother's Day to address what we saw from the Last Dance doc last week. You know, we're back, my pops and I. This is episode 3 of Like Father, Like Son. So we just appreciate you guys for continuously supporting this thing. It seems like the conversations are getting better and better each week. So we're gonna get into some takeaways from episodes 5 and 6 last week, like we usually do. But definitely, there's Frank, my guy. Frank is on, so I definitely want to let you guys know that try to stay tuned for the full hour because we do have some bonus stuff coming up in the last, towards the end of that of today's show. And I hope you guys not getting yelled at for taking some time away from your moms right now. Your moms can pull up. They can pull up next to you and watch this with you. You know what I mean? So, all right. So Dad, let's first get into some of the major takeaways from last week. So, the first topic we're gonna talk about, MJ, and this is something that you obviously knew. I was a baby, so I didn't know this at the time, but I did not realize that MJ was so emotionally spent after that first three-peat. Just how, I mean, he looked like he would when they finally broke through and they were able to beat the Knicks, because remember they were down 2-0 to the Knicks. You remember that. And I was even having a conversation with my boy Briscoe, who tunes in to the show from time to time.
Right.
And we were talking about, and I was saying that if I was old enough to know what was going on at that time,
right,
I'm going to be honest with you. As a Bulls fan, I would have been nervous. Going down 2-0 to the Knicks, I would have been beyond nervous, man. But the fact that they were able to still get the job done and then get to the finals, and ultimately, they eventually beat Charles Barkley and the Phoenix Suns. I think it was in 6 games. But when they won, Mike looked like he was more relieved.
Oh, you can imagine.
Than really joyous, So,
right.
And I say that to say this, Dad. My question to you is this: knowing what we know now, more so me really knowing what I know now, just in terms of him being so emotionally spent and looking like he just needed a break from the game of basketball at that point. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know if, let's say MJ would have stuck around and he didn't leave to go play baseball, didn't retire the first time. I don't know, man, if MJ and the Bulls would have been able to get there the 4th straight time and to win it. Win a 4th straight title.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, one thing I will tell you is that looking at the NBA and looking at that schedule of the NBA players, it's a very lengthy season. And then when you go into the playoffs and then you get into the finals, you're talking about a lot of minutes on the body. So Michael Jordan did that for 3 years, okay?
That's true.
And with getting a lot of pounding from some tough teams. New York was a tough team. So, of course, he was going to be worn down. Not only that, just think about the schedule that a Michael Jordan would have. He's doing interviews before games. He's doing interviews after games.
I know.
He's the media is running him down constantly. He's getting breaks, trying to go play some golf, get some quiet time, just get away from people. So I can imagine it was a lot on him around that time. And I think that was also during the time after his father's.
No, this was before
his father's.
This was just
right.
This is when he was dealing with. See, it's also interesting because I'm learning some of this for the first time. I knew about the gambling stuff, but this kind of put it in a different type of perspective. Just showing you everything that he was, him and the team were dealing with in that 92-93 season.
Right.
With this was the first time, he kind of dealt with, the media will build you up just so they can tear you down.
Right.
He had already experienced being built up and being put on that pedestal, and then, in that 92-93 season, the gambling stuff, all of that stuff that came out in the media, and then him being asked about that constantly.
Oh yeah, that was,
and then the Jordan Rules book that came out. We're gonna get into that. That came out with Sam Smith, and then just on top of that, you're still trying to compete.
Right.
You're still playing against the Knicks. You got a lot of talent. On both in the East and the Western Conference, especially in the East at that particular time. So you're trying to get that three-peat. I think at that particular time, there really weren't. There were few teams that were able to compete and win 3 straight championships, let alone win 2 straight. So now you have a chance to go and make history. So I feel like it was all of that kind of accumulated.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all of that together kind of made he was just so spent at that particular point, man.
Right.
So I personally, that's why I don't think that he would have. And I understand that people want to look at it. People that's diehard MJ fans like myself want to look at it and say, "Hey, look, man, MJ. If he would have stuck around and he didn't retire that first time, if he didn't retire that second time, he probably have 10." You heard Charles Barkley this past week. He'll have 10, 11, 12 championships. I don't think it's that simple because you really saw the work that they had to put in just to get that first three-peat, to check that off the list.
Right. When you're talking about at the end of the first three-peat, when he went into baseball, correct?
So say that again. My bad, Frank kind of distracted me there. No, go ahead. What you saying?
No, go ahead and answer Frank's question.
No, I don't think he had a question. He was saying Mike, because we were about to get into that. He said Mike has a gambling problem. He put gambling in all caps. He said,
I totally
how are
agree
you
with
betting
you,
against
Frank.
security guards?
I totally agree with you, Frank. I know Karl said that
I don't
we had
think
a
he does,
discussion
man.
and
I
he
don't
said
think
that he
he
didn't
does.
think he had a gambling problem. But anytime you leave the night before a playoff game to go down to Atlantic City to gamble, I mean, come on.
Frank,
he had that hunger to want to do it, and he enjoyed doing it. He had the money to do it, so it was an enjoyment for him. So maybe that's what he did to get away and just get his mind. That's his escape. So
that was an escape. I listen,
but
Frank,
he did it for so long, and we can get into a little bit more discussion about the incident when he. It was one of these guys that gambled on golf.
Oh yeah. Well, we're gonna talk about that when he was on the trial.
Okay,
but no, but I just want to say because that's my look. Me and my dad, we disagree on this, right? And shout out to anybody who's watching on Facebook, and we got some people chiming in. But we disagree on this, man. I listen. He said it himself. We saw him say it in the documentary. They asked him about it. Do you have a gambling problem? And Mike basically said, look. Mike said, I have it written right in my notes. He said, I don't have a gambling problem. I have a competition problem. That's how I feel. I feel like Mike has a competition problem. Whether he's gambling for 10 grand or playing a card game for $1, I think he has a competition problem, not necessarily a gambling problem. When you're talking about a gambling issue, he would be putting up his rings for sale, his home for sale.
Right.
Like he was even
saying.
No,
he even said that. Yeah.
He said his family would not be in the position that they're in if he had a gambling problem. This man's a billionaire.
Right.
He's a billionaire.
Yeah,
I don't think he has a gambling problem.
You may be right about that because he's $2 billion worth of value there for this guy and owns a franchise.
Yep.
So obviously you can't be making mistakes. If you have a major gambling issue, you would be out there wasting money.
Now, there's two things I want to touch on because I know we want to talk about that. Him being a witness in that trial. I want to talk about that because that's the one thing that kind of rubbed me the wrong way about Mike in the gambling situation when that came out last week. But before I get to that, going back to what you and Frank were just talking about with Atlantic City, I'm just saying this, Frank. If I'm in the NBA, right, and my dad is one of my best friends in life, we got a close relationship. He knows I'm stressed. You know, he knows that going and just doing a little bit of gambling, having some fun, nothing crazy, but just a little bit of gambling is something that kind of can take my mind off of the pressure, right, and off of the series because they were losing to the Knicks at the time. Is that really bad if me and my father decide to drive to Atlantic City, you know, go to take a trip to Jersey, go gamble for a little bit, get home around 1 o'clock in the morning? I mean, is that really?
Didn't they have to get back up and for practice the next morning?
Which he did.
Did they have a game the next morning? Or what?
I think they had to get a game the next day. That was the problem. They had a game the next day.
Yeah, I think that was the only concern.
Maybe it was getting home late.
Yeah.
Maybe it was more so getting back late.
But he's Michael Jordan. And I guess, Dennis Rodman got his opportunities.
Exactly.
Right? So I guess
which came later, but look,
this
I don't
think the coach allowed for some superstars, knowing this was their vice. This was something that they needed to do to lighten the load.
Absolutely. And my man Boog just responded. He said Dennis Rodman did the same and had the best turnaround of his career. Exactly. That's a good point.
Right.
He's right. He did the same thing. That came later. That came during the second three-peat. But that's the truth, man. He kind of did the same. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that trial, right? So I didn't know anything about this his golf buddy. I didn't know anything about him, who was basically a golf.
Yeah, I
hustler.
heard about it in the news, but didn't really follow the story that much because it kind of disappeared.
During that time, it kind of disappeared, right? Yeah, so I mean, I didn't know much about it, but I will say that was the first. That did cause me to kind of raise my eyebrows last week when I saw that because remember that $57,000 loan that was in question. when to remind people when MJ said, hey, I got a $57,000 loan from this particular guy.
He needed $57,000.
Exactly, right? Now, because at that time he was making about $3 million, a little over $3 million a year. So what do you need?
Nike,
plus the endorsements. Yeah. But when that guy was on trial for something, and Mike had to be a witness in the trial, and that's when it came out that Mike said, I kind of lied about it being a loan. It was a gambling debt. To my knowledge, if I'm remembering it correctly, that's what Mike had said when he took the stand. So that's the one thing that I looked at and said, okay, maybe like if I was at that particular time, if I was close to Mike, that's when I would kind of be looking at Mike like, all right, let's not let this get kind of out of hand. So,
and that should have been a wake-up call for him, and it may very well have been.
What up,
because
Terrence?
I believe he did say that he only lied because he was embarrassed. And he didn't want that to get out in the news because he knew as soon as he agreed and said that it was a debt, gambling debt, people would have blown it up to make it seem like he did have a serious gambling problem. So that's probably why he did lie. And but he's got to watch who he hangs out with, right? Especially these hustlers. But see, he can attract hustlers. Can you imagine him, Michael Jordan? I would be waiting at the first tee, waiting on this guy if I knew that he was had a lot of money and liked to gamble at golf. I would probably be there waiting for him as well. And that's all that hustler did. Waited for him. Absolutely. And, they probably had some good battles. But I'm glad that he got out of that with any serious damage to his personality,
Exactly, yeah. No, I mean, like I said, I don't really think it's a gambling issue. I think it's just the competition problem. But I guess when you mix the two, that can become kind of problematic when you're mixing the two, right? I want to talk about the Pops. I want to talk about the Jordan Rules book.
Okay.
I want to talk about that book because that was one of the first times where that was really, even before the gambling situation came out in the public. That was like that first thing, that came out in the public where it really kind of started to put Mike in a bad light.
Right.
With the Jordan's rules, the Jordan Rules, where they were basically Sam Smith, who had spent time with Mike, had spent time with the team, and kind of gained their trust, and he's having conversations with guys. About some of the personal things that's going on in the practices, and just kind of behind closed doors, and it really shed a negative light on Mike. It made him seem like he was a mean teammate, like a bad teammate.
Right.
So during that time, what was that like when all that came out?
Man, it was all over the news, man. We were hearing about it.
What's up, Trey? What's up, Brandon?
Jordan Rules, and talking about things that he's able to get away with, how he's treating other players on the team. But I was just amazed during that time how they stayed focused. If you, from looking at it from my vantage point, they were still winning games, they were still staying focused, and they were still performing well.
So when that Jordan Rules book came out, it didn't really shake the team that much. They
shook the team, but some kind of way they were able to keep it together. You know what I mean? And I don't know if it was because they kept people. They were tighter with the locker room and the practices, not allowing people to come in and have access to those things. That might have been why it wasn't such a big deal. And obviously, I'm sure it was bothering Michael because he's hearing about some of his players saying some things. And Horace Grant was the main one. Matter of fact, I saw an interview. They interviewed Horace Grant asking him about that very question. And he was kind of upset because he felt like it was put all on him, like he was the one sharing this information. But he did agree that he was one of them. Horace was one of them. And he named a few other players on the team that guy was interviewing a lot. He even said he interviewed Michael. So I don't know what information Michael was giving him.
And we're going to talk about something interesting later because, Sam Smith came out with an article on NBA.com before this doc came out because he wanted to set the record straight about that whole, Republicans buy sneakers too. We're gonna talk about that. So stay tuned for that. Something that my man Brandon, shout out to Brandon, and I see my cousin
Brandon.
Jonathan just tuned
right,
in.
Johnny.
Brandon said, "You're not." This is in reference to Horace Grant. He said, "You're not telling me I can't eat after games because I had a bad game." So because they had a weird relationship because even Horace Grant, I was watching something recently when he was saying that Mike didn't want the Bulls to get him
pick him up
his rookie season. He didn't want Horace Grant. So there was their relationship was rocky from the
start. Yeah. And they said they had some concerns about Horace being a little too soft, whining too much when they were playing physical ball on him. And they had to really help to get him built up to where he was. I liked Horace Grant as a player, and he was a great support cast for the team to accomplish their goals. But hey, look, if you ever played basketball and you had some softies on the team, hey, look, you had to be a little hard on them sometimes. You know what I mean? That's old school. You can't be having them weak links. Come on.
And it's so crazy you said that, because one of the topics that we have for today, that we're gonna get to, is Steve. You heard what Stephen A. said.
What Stephen
when
A. said?
He said not only are the guys today, the game softer today. You got a lot of softies out there, but he was calling them wusses.
Man. Stephen A. ought to stop that. He ought to stop that, man. He ought to stop that. Hey, look, the game rules have changed. Guys are cheating the system. Faking fouls. I think that's going to damage the game if they continue to play like that. And I was glad when they started letting guys, because what's my man's name on Houston? The beard man. I'm telling you, when they stopped calling those little fouls on him, you started seeing what happened to his team. They never made it past last round before they were in the playoffs. They would get to that final championship series for the West Coast, but they couldn't get there anymore.
But you know what? Let's get into that real quick. We might as well bring it up. We're gonna bring it up later. We'll get to it right now. So you guys brought it up, and by the way, Boog, he agrees with you, Pops. He says Horace Grant was definitely soft at first. And I see, shout out to my little brother Kobe. He joined. So.
And I think it actually did help him get better. And they wouldn't have got those championships without his support. No question about that.
Okay, so let's talk about that then. Let's talk about that era, like the 80s and 90s era, which is a totally different era from what we've seen the last 20 years.
Right.
Especially the last 10 years. So, do you think it's fair? I know you've kind of like alluded to this before, like about the game being kind of soft now. Do you actually think that that's a fair statement to say that the guys in today's game, have no idea what the guys from the 80s and 90s had to deal with? Do you think that these guys today are soft? Do you think the game is soft? Do you think it's fair for Stephen A. to say that?
Well, I'm not saying that the guys are soft, because there's some tough guys out there in the NBA today. I mean, Russell Westbrook, guys like him. But let me just tell you this. If we could get them playing like they played in that last quarter of the All-Star game, that would be an awesome season. Can you imagine what that would be like? The defense, the physical play. And that you saw the best of the NBA come out in that last quarter of the All-Star game.
You talking about this past one?
Yeah. If we can see that kind of play, throughout the season, especially in the playoffs, I think we'll get some really good shows, because I think guys get an easy lane going in the middle. And of course, the way the game is played now, they don't have centers playing that same position. They're not closing that middle up, where now that middle is open. Once you get past your defender, you pretty much have an easy lane to go right to the basket. But back in the day, we always had that center hang around that middle of the key, under the basket position, and they were always there to challenge the person coming in for a dunk.
So I hear what you're saying, Pops. I got to push back a little bit, because after Stephen A's remarks, Dominique Foxworth, who you see on ESPN a lot, right? He was upset about it. He was really upset about it. So he kind of responded. He responded to Stephen A's remarks, and then him and Jalen Rose were debating it on ESPN's Get Up.
Gotcha.
And I put that there. So they were debating it. And look, I don't think Jalen was agreeing with Stephen A. All he was basically saying is that there's no doubting the fact that the physicality of the game is so different between both of those eras. Like what it was back in the day, it's not as physical now, right? Which is true. I don't think that he was agreeing with Stephen A. about these guys being soft, but he was just saying the game is not as physical.
Right.
But for Dominique Foxworth, he was upset because he felt like, listen, you guys want to say that LeBron and the superstars and the all-stars of today's game are soft, that they get emotional, that they're teaming up to win championships. He was basically saying, listen, these guys are no more emotional than how MJ and those guys were. We see it right now in the media with Mike, with Isaiah Thomas, the bad boy Pistons, Pippen, all of that. Guys, Dominique's pretty much saying guys were emotional back then. They're emotional now. Guys wanted it bad back then. They wanted championships back then, and guys want championships now. They just going about it a different way. So he was basically saying it's not fair for Stephen A. to call these dudes soft.
Right. Well, I agree with that, and Stephen A. also has to look at the fact that the NBA might be purposely changing these rules so they can control things getting out of hand. Because can you imagine fights breaking out on the court with the social media the way it is? Guys feeling like they get embarrassed if somebody was to punch him or push him or throw him on the ground. Guys would be embarrassed, so they're going to always come back to fight back. And what's going to happen is you're going to get this outburst of fights on the court, and they could end up in the stands with these high-paying ticket holders, right?
we saw
So they probably are doing their
Palace.
best to keep it under control. And I think that's why they're doing it now, just to keep the game fun, keep it under control, because it could get out of hand if you allow too many of those hard fouls, I would think.
Yeah, but my thing is, that's what I'm saying. I think that you can't really blame the players for that, right? It's
Right.
It's almost like we talk about this all the time with when we look at any sport, boxing, when we're looking at the competition and how things have changed.
Mm-hmm.
How can you blame someone who was born when they were born, ended up playing the game during this particular era, and they're going out there and they're playing based off of what the rules are? And then some guys take the rules too far, like James Harden, and he'll flop and he'll try to play into the referees, things like that. But there's all-stars and superstars in the game today who I think that they would have been fine if you put them back there with the Detroit Pistons in the 80s and the Knicks and the Lakers and the Celtics and the Bulls.
Right.
Let me see something real quick. We got Boog said in the 80s and 90s players, they brought some wrestling moves to games for sure. Absolutely. They weren't out there. That's what I'm saying. I said this, I was on, shout out to Clive, and now I was on this show this week, and we were talking about the Pistons and the Bulls, and I was basically saying, listen, I don't think this is obviously you were watching it live, but from what I saw, like all the highlights and just the highlights of them throwing these guys across the court, that's not basketball, man.
Right.
That's not basketball. It's one thing to be physical, but it's also another thing that, like Boog is saying, you're wrestling.
Yeah. That's dirty play. My boy Draymond Green, he's one that's still trying to. He's trying to bring that kind of play back, because he kind of plays dirty, and you have a few other players in the league that play dirty. But dirty, it's no place for dirty play because we don't want to get someone hurt and have a career-ending injury. And that's the way I feel about that.
Frank makes a good point, too. He said the guys in today's game are more athletic than in the past. Some of these fouls in today's game are an injury waiting to happen. I guess he's saying because of the athleticism.
Right, yeah. They get so high up in the air now, man. Can you imagine the legs getting knocked under them, landing on their neck, landing on their back? It could be a serious injury. So I think they're doing a good job controlling it. They need to stop calling these little touch fouls, though, because that just irritates me, and it keeps the game moving slow because you want the game to move fast. So all they have to do is look back at that last quarter of that All-Star game, and I think they can find a formula that can really be successful for satisfying even the old school guys with the way the game is being played now.
Yeah, when we as fans, when we watch the games, regular season games, we want to feel like we're watching a playoff game.
Right.
Whether it's November, whether it's January, whether it's March, you want to feel like you're in a playoff environment because you remember. I think it's gotten better within the last few years, the last few seasons. Right. But I remember there was a point where, when people wouldn't, maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago, people were like, I'll catch the NBA once they went after All-Star break. Because you just knew that guys were gonna not play, guys were gonna take plays off, they were gonna take quarters off, they were gonna take games off, and fans you don't pay your hard-earned money to see that, and you don't turn on the television and spend hours watching the game to see guys playing like it's the off season or like it's preseason.
I mean, these guys are getting paid top dollar now, so they really need to bring it and give the people, the fans, their money's worth, and that's what I want to see in the game right now. And
honestly, also to go back to what Frank was saying about just the difference in athleticism, I actually think that you got to give credit to your era, because of that. I mean, we talk about this all the time. Mike didn't start lifting weight. How you wait until your NBA career? You wait until the late 80s to start lifting weights? You got guys nowadays, we're lifting weights in high school at the age of 14, 15. So the fact that they were able to do some of the things on the basketball court that they were doing without that natural born athleticism, I think that's pretty impressive, man.
Yeah. And I think many of them had natural born athleticism, but they just weren't able to develop the muscle mass and to allow them to even elevate it to another level. Because can you imagine if they were doing weight training, some of those athletes? I can't imagine what Dr. J would have been able to do if he was doing weight training back in the day. I mean, it would have been deadly. I mean, it already was unbelievable. But can you imagine what kind of damage he could have done? But my man, Dr. J was smart. When the fights broke out on the court, he went and sat down and let them do what they had to do. He knew that his value was on the court.
He wasn't trying to get involved. Then let's talk about let's skip to '98, and I want to talk about Mike being fed up with the fame at that particular point, because we saw last week. We saw the footage of him in there with the film crew, and he's in a hotel room, and he's laying on that couch. He's got a cigar in his mouth, and he's like, listen, matter of fact, I can even quote it, because this dude at this particular point was just kind of fed up. He said, this is not one of those lifestyles that you envy. He said, I'm ready for getting out of this life. So at that particular point in '98, I'm not surprised now that he ended up retiring for the second time.
Right.
Back then, because it just looked like he was just fed up with walking. Every time he was walking out of a room, anywhere, everybody's grabbing at him.
Right.
Did you feel that back then, or were you not really paying
Well,
attention?
I could tell that he was frustrated with all the attention he was getting from so many different things, and I know it was kind of wearing on him. And you talking about just before he went into baseball?
No, I'm talking about in '98, the second time that he retired.
Oh, the second time.
That footage they showed was from from when I think '97, '98.
I see. Got you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure he had a lot going on and a lot to bring stress, but that game is tough. Basketball is a tough sport, and these guys, you got to understand. If you look at Michael Jordan, he played most of the games every year he played. He wasn't a guy taking those breaks.
There was no load management, man.
This guy, and when he was on the court, he was giving it 100%. A good bit of the time, of course. I know sometimes we go over the top with Mike and start acting like he's Superman, but we know he took some breaks, but he knew when to take the breaks during the course of the game, and that's one of the things why he was a very smart player and was able to manage that. But at some point, he probably wanted a break, but he knew a couple things was pulling him: the dollars, the endorsements.
And competing.
And competing. So he had all those different things that was pulling at him. So,
but to kind of go off what you're saying, Kobe made that particular point some time ago, where he was saying, great players know how to take a break in the midst of playing.
Right.
There's certain ways you can take a break, whether that's defensively, whether that's offensively. It's just the way you would play. Like Kobe Bryant was saying, at one point. During his playing days, he said, "Look, man, when you playing those back-to-backs, or you're playing 3 straight games, consecutive games, he's like, yeah, it's wear and tear on your body." So he said what he would do is, like the first game, like let's say he plays them Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. On Tuesday night, he said, I'm going out there and I'm focused on putting my bat to the basket and doing things in the perimeter, right? He said, by the time I get to Wednesday night, I'm more so focusing on, mid-range game, that sort of thing, getting out there in the perimeter. And he said, by the time we get to the third game, I'm getting some of my guys more involved. You got to just kind of find ways to reinvent yourself from night to night so that you're not killing yourself on the basketball court.
Right? And it will happen, too.
Absolutely.
That's for sure.
And let me see, Frank just said something. He said, he said Mike is mad about the fame. Get over it. People like him and Tiger Woods, they have different responsibilities as black men. That's partially why I get mad when they don't take political stances like LeBron. So now, see, Frank, I have a question, man. Were you in our meeting? Were you in our meeting before this episode? Because it's like you're jumping the gun here, man. You're jumping the gun.
Yeah, that's on our list of discussion topics.
Let's talk about that. You were there. At that time, so what was going on? What was going on at the time? Was there a major focus placed on the fact that Mike did not get behind that the guy?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I did not remember that emphasized there, but after hearing about it and understanding the fact that his mother had to come and talk to him to try to encourage him to go support this candidate. I thought that was a great opportunity for Mike to step to the plate. And one reason why I said it is because he could have asked this, even if he didn't understand what was going on in the politics at that time, he could have talked with his mom because she was very much aware, and she could have let him know how important his endorsement could have been. But can you also imagine, once he endorsed him, what kind of attacks that he would have received, what kind of pressures that would have come upon him at that point? We have no idea. Based on him just playing basketball, he had a lot on him. But if he would have done that, I can imagine it would have been overwhelming. And you got to be a special cat to deal with that, as Muhammad Ali and Wilt Chamberlain, Wes Unseld.
So I want to.
I didn't mean to put Wes Unseld in there. Bill Russell is who I meant to say.
Thank you. All right, so I want to dig into this. I want to dig into this because I had a lot of notes on this particular topic. Frank, I'm so glad you brought it up, man. What did Frank just say? LeBron's deals with that every day. Look at Jason Whitlock. I know. We just had that situation. You know, for people who don't know, everything that's going on with Ahmaud Arbery right now, and LeBron spoke out about it, and he basically said, look, he feels like black people are hunted, right? And of course, I'm not surprised, but of course, Jason Whitlock, he took instead of taking that time to talk about the situation with Ahmaud who was just murdered, instead of talking about that, he decides to go off on LeBron and basically to do a whole segment just kind of going in on LeBron and criticizing what he said and saying that, you know, he wants to make it about race and make it about a whole bunch of stuff. But I'm just not surprised with Jason Whitlock, man. But you're definitely right, Frank. But let's go back. I want to kind of set the stage real quick here. So, because I want to dig into this deeper. 1990. Okay, you got some people that's watching might see this later, might not know. Democratic nominee Harvey Gantt. All right, at that time he was challenging Jesse Helms in North Carolina for his U.S. Senate seat. So Jordan, he was the state's biggest celebrity. That's where he's from. He's the state's biggest celebrity at the time. He declined to endorse Gantt as an African American who was Charlotte's first black mayor at that time. All right, and he was going up against an opponent who was widely considered to be a racist, right? So, so then it came out, right? Then it comes out that Jordan says something in private that kind of rubbed people the wrong way. Sam Smith reported on it when Jordan said Republicans buy sneakers too, right? So, do you remember that quote coming out there? What was going on in your mind, and what was just going on what were people in your circle, your close circles, talking about at that time?
Well, I think back during that time, people were a little offended about that remark because politics was big time. People followed things like this. Racism was alive and well during that time, as it is today. And a lot of people thought he was selfish and he was just really protecting his brand, which I really believe he probably was when you think about it. And he was not trying to rub anybody the wrong way, either whether you were on one side or the other. But we're not talking about Republicans and Democrats. We're talking about racists, okay? And this is where he should have stepped to the plate because this man needed to be removed. And I think he ended up winning and beating that African-American
and MJ
mayor.
did financially, I guess you want to say financially endorse. He did give money to the Gantt campaign anonymously. He
told his mom that he would give a donation towards it, but
he would not speak out.
Wasn't enough to get him that victory, and that's unfortunate.
But check this out, Pops. I wonder if you knew this, right? Because I read this on NBA.com. This is interesting, right? So in an article on NBA.com, Sam Smith wanted to set the record straight on that quote that I just mentioned. The whole Republicans buy sneakers too, right?
Okay.
That's a quote that he believes has been misunderstood for years. So I want to talk about that. So these are just some excerpts from what Sam Smith wrote in his column, right? So he said he wrote the NBA was in trouble in the early 1980s. It wasn't going out of business, but business was not good. He said, so the league and the players agreed to a new payroll certainty that enabled enough franchises to survive and eventually begin to prosper, right? However, part of the deal was to limit the commentary about controversial issues. Even the most socially active players like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who boycotted the 1968 Olympics over racial issues and still with Muhammad Ali, he even went silent at that time. Players were asked to concentrate on basketball in the best interest of the league. Then Sam Smith also writes, I recall advocates like Jim Brown coming around occasionally and condemning Jordan for his muted nature. Then Jordan would be vigorously defended by the other stars of the game because they understood where Mike was coming from. So then Sam Smith writes this. He says, so I was talking with Jordan before a game at his locker one day, right? Now, mind you, Smith had a previous journalism history in politics. All right, so he came from Washington. Gotcha. He was involved in politics from a journalistic standpoint. So he says, I was blathering on about Jesse Helms and that North Carolina Senate race. So I'm making my case about Charlotte Mayor Harvey Gantt. And even though Jordan knew this wasn't a topic that was best for his league, He's still delighted in having the last word because after all, that meant that you would win the conversation, right? He's all about competition. So then he goes on to say, Republicans, he said with a smile, buy sneakers too. At the time, it was a joke. This is what Sam Smith is saying. He said, at the time, it was a joke. He said, stop taking yourselves so seriously. MJ never took himself seriously. He also added that MJ wasn't particularly active or interested in politics at that time, though he might have been. I'm trying to see what he said here. That didn't make sense. But basically, Jordan wasn't actively interested in politics at that time. But after his career was over, he said, I do know that he was seriously involved with Barack Obama's campaigns and has supported more social causes than most, mostly quietly though, and anonymously. Right? So, what do you think? Did you know that? Did you know about some of those things that Sam Smith?
No, I didn't know about some of that information. Nope.
I think
especially about how they got the players to agree because it was affecting the game and they needed to focus on just the basketball in order to build the NBA, opposed to having controversial issues out there in the forefront.
I wasn't aware of that.
But thank God that we've come beyond that now.
Oh, absolutely.
We stepped to the plate on it now, and I'm really happy to see.
But
that.
I'm just saying that's something that we can't just skate over. Those are different. Those are completely different times. Money was not the same, right? A lot of things were not the same. Now of course people can look at it and say, well, hey, if you have people who are making $50,000 a year and they're verbalizing their they're being vocal about their frustrations with race relations in America at that time. Someone like Michael Jordan, who's got millions of dollars from the NBA, he's got millions of dollars from his endorsements. He should be able to step to the plate too. But I really think that the issue with that, man, really, and I think about something that Charles Barkley said, where he basically said, "I'm not a role model." Right. I think that what happens is these guys and girls get into these positions where they're now such a focal point in the media, and you have people who look up to them and become fans of them, and now we expect them to feel the way that we do about some of these political issues, and we expect them to vocalize their frustrations. Like, what do you think about it? Do you think that's fair? Do you think that once you reach that plateau in a sport or in entertainment, that should be attached to it, that you should have to be a voice for your community?
Well, I don't think that that's something that you should be forced to do, mainly because some people don't have an interest in it. And but when it's costing people lives, I think that's when you have to step to the plate. And you have to be truthful because you're an American and you see what's going on in the country and you see how people are being treated. And it could be your neighbor, it could be a family member, and it actually could end up being you. So I think you have to take note of those things, especially you out in the public eye, and you're able to get a lot of people to support what you're doing. But unfortunately, we live in a society where people are driven by money, and many times they can choose that over voicing their opinion about a certain situation because they may think it may hurt their brand,
affect their dollars,
and affect their dollars. So, but I do feel like it's some kind of responsibility. I'm not saying the politics, but I am talking about dealing with issues that affect the human race in a negative fashion, and we just need to be able to be a voice because it can help people.
Absolutely.
People that's out in the forefront like that, it can make a difference. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You have some people like I would use Jay-Z and Beyonce as an example. You have some people who they put in all of this work, right? They strategize to get to a point where they feel like, okay, now I'm Teflon Don. Now I can say what I want to say. I can take certain controversial stances. I kind of feel like that's what, and I'm a big fan of Jay and Beyonce. I feel like that's kind of what they did. They got to a certain point where they said, okay, now we're set financially, family's good. We've made some really smart decisions business-wise, and now we're pretty much, our brands are stronger than a lot of these brands are trying to team up with us, right, and partner with us. So now I can, Beyonce can come out there during the Super Bowl and put on a performance where people felt like that it was controversial, right? Because remember the references there with the Black Panthers, right? And then Jay-Z getting behind Meek Mill with the whole justice reform,
right,
with the prison system and everything like that. So you're seeing that, but some people can look at them and say, well, hold on, you had to wait until you got to a point where now it's a little safer, right? But on the other hand, you might look at someone like a Colin Kaepernick, who I know in today's times we don't really have any Muhammad Ali's and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's and Bill Russell's. The stance that they took back in your days, man, that's way more risky.
Yeah,
than what we're seeing now. But I can respect someone like Kaepernick because even though, yes, I know he probably has his NFL pension, he's got the endorsement with Nike, he's got his book deal, and he's got his Know Your Rights camps. I still feel like with someone like him, he's a perfect example of someone who did not really have to make that his responsibility to take a knee and to take that stance, but he did, and he ended up paying for it in the long run with the dollars. But I respect that more than anything he's accomplished as a football player.
Right. And you see why he was bringing that to the attention of the people, because just like now we're still dealing with black men getting killed by police officers or getting killed by individuals that feel like they can just take a person's life while they're unarmed and not doing any harm to anybody. And something has to stop this. And it's going to take everybody coming together and voicing their concerns about this issue, and it's going to take people in high positions to make it happen as well.
Absolutely. Something that Frank said here, once you reach the pinnacle of your sport, like Floyd Mayweather, Tiger Woods, MJ, you better read a book and get political. I like that. I like that. Kind of calling them to, putting them on the spot.
Got to be aware. Got to be aware of what's going on around you.
I agree. I like that. No, I like that point, Frank, man, because I do think that, yes, you don't have to, you're not necessarily obligated to say, I'm going to now become an activist now that I'm a successful athlete. But at the same time, I just think that you're doing your fans a disservice, right? The people that look up to you in those communities that come and support you financially, right? Because we're supporting Floyd when we buying the fights. We support you. We're supporting Mike when you were buying tickets to the games or watching the games on television. You do have I think that you do have an obligation, man, to, like you said, pick up a book, read the news, look at the news, know what's going on. Definitely know what's going on. And I would say that's been my major gripe. Even I'm a big Tiger fan and I'm a Floyd fan in terms of what they do from the athletic standpoint, but that's been my gripe with them.
And neither one of them steps to the plate when it comes to that, and it's very disappointing, I must say.
Yeah, and then you said and then Boogie said, I don't think Floyd could. He's trying to say Floyd can. And then
ask 50 Cent about that,
right? And then Frank said, yeah, Floyd ain't the reading type. Funny, man. Brandon said facts. Okay. So we got about like 15 minutes left, but I do want to get into something else that was talked about this week. And listen, if you guys have more to say about everything that we've been discussing, feel free to throw in the comments, and we can keep that conversation going too. Stephen A. and Max Kellerman, Dad, they had an interesting debate this week about MJ's leadership versus LeBron's leadership, right? It's because like this doc has really it's interesting, man, because this doc has really created so many more debates, and it's brought some of the younger guys like LeBron and KD into the mix of the conversation, right? But I was so happy to see that they weren't having another pointless debate about who's better in terms of basketball, but they were talking about
because I think they all determine who's better by the series has kind of stamped it, so we don't have to make that argument anymore. Now they talking about who's the better leader. So let's go ahead and focus on the better leader.
So Stephen A. was basically saying, listen, I'm going to go to Max. I like the point that Max made. Max said that when he thinks about Michael Jordan as a leader, when he was on the Bulls, MJ was the type of leader that would push his teammates, right? Whereas LeBron, in his illustrious career, has been the type of leader to more so pull his teammates. Like Stephen A. was saying, you see LeBron joking around with guys. Like his first stint in Cleveland, he was doing a lot of joking, and he was really playful with his teammates. But when it came down to getting, competing for that title and showing up in the clutch moments, he didn't feel like that. Stephen A. was saying he did not feel like LeBron really pushed his teammates. He kind of just tried to carry them or pull them along. But with MJ could be seen being harsh, right, in practices and in games because putting fire under the butt. So what do you think about the difference in that leadership? Is one right? Is one wrong, or is it just kind of a preference?
I think it's just a different leadership style, and because I think both of them are effective in their leadership style. Obviously,
Uncle Todd, what's up, man?
Obviously, Michael Jordan, his approach. He didn't care whether you liked him or not. He didn't care whether you hung out with him or not. He was like letting you know, this is what we're going to do. This is what our goal is, and you're on board if you're on this team.
Yep.
And that's just the bottom
He didn't
line.
care if you
So
hurt
I'm
your
going
feelings,
to, he didn't care about your feelings, and that's one of the things that I see Kobe got from Michael, because he had that same kind of approach in a leadership role. LeBron, I think LeBron is concerned more about relationships and having buddies on the team, having guys that want to follow him. And I think they get on board with supporting LeBron because they like him. More that they like
and
the
because
guy.
he can play.
Well, he's definitely a great player.
You know?
But they like him, and he likes to pull people along, and he likes to get them on board with what the goal is that he wants. And if you're not doing that on the team, what he does, he goes to another team. He don't stay here. Because he feels like this: if I can't break this group and get them to go over and do what I'm trying to accomplish and work hard towards that goal, I'm gonna move over here and go and ask D Wade to come on board and Bosh, and then we'll go ahead.
Or LeBron's gonna just throw subliminals. That's one thing I would say, and I love LeBron, but one thing I would say that has bothered me about LeBron over the years, he hasn't really been doing it that much this year, but. You remember how he was with Kevin Love when he was on Cleveland? Very passive aggressive. If Kevin Love didn't play the way that LeBron wanted him to play, or they had some issues on the court, after the game you'll see LeBron in a picture on Instagram with Kyrie Irving and Tristan Thompson, but not Kev Love. So I don't like the passive aggressiveness, man.
Yeah, let them know they're not in that circle anymore. And I don't know, being a little hard on those guys. I think at some point he has been hard on certain players, but overall just a different leadership style. And I just think that unfortunately Mike has gotten more out of his style than LeBron has in terms of the team.
I would say in terms of winning too, because I truly think
winning
that
too. Winning
even though
LeBron,
even though I think LeBron has the basketball in his hands way too much sometimes, I do think that he does empower his players. Man, I think he does try to make the guys around him better. I'm not saying Mike didn't. I'm just saying I do think that LeBron tries to make guys.
Well, one thing I had a
better.
problem with with LeBron is sometimes a guy can come on the team and have different skill sets, and he will change what their focus is and what their giftedness is, and kind of put them in a position where he wants them to do this
to
for
fit
him.
his game.
Yeah, to fit what he wants. And what he wants is he'll move a big guy out of the middle or out of the low post and put him out there at the 3-point line.
Bosh.
And make them just start shooting 3-point shots, and I just think that that's just not good for that player, because the player is going to ultimately lose value, and when they have to go somewhere else and play, it's going to be hard for them to get on the team, especially if they don't get to develop well. And I think this happened with a couple of players on this team.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know if either leadership style is right or wrong. I just think that it's one of them situations where I look at MJ. MJ was, like you said, Kobe was like him. They did whatever it took, if we're on the same team, I'm going to push you, as hard as I had to push you, because I know that when we holding up the trophy together, you'll be happy that I pushed you.
Right.
With LeBron, it's a little different. We talked about what they were talking about on First Take, where they said that, how many times when he was going up against Golden State, he would kind of almost, like after the Eastern Conference Finals and they about to go to the finals, he would almost make some early excuses just to kind of lighten the load, just in case they don't win. I feel like Mike was never doing that type of stuff, man.
Yeah.
Mike was like, no, we're going to win.
He let the reporters know about a previous injury that he had in the kitchen at the house when he was playing with his babies or something like that.
Hold on, man. Hold on. I want to get to some of the things we're seeing here. Let's see. We got a lot of stuff here. My man Brandon, shout out to Brandon. He said First Take made a good point about how black athletes will always have the pressure of being a pillar for their own, but people not of color do not have to be role models for their race.
Man, that's a good one. I'm glad he brought that up.
Man, that's a great point, man.
Because they were just talking about that. When you think about white athletes, they are never expected to stand up for issues in the politics or anything. You never hear about it, and not even standing up for issues of race. When they see black and African Americans being treated wrong, they just overlook it. They don't address it. You never hear them talking about it. But it's the black players that have to step to the forefront. And I think it's a terrible thing that they've allowed white athletes to get away with, especially high-profile white athletes, and to put that kind of pressure on African American athletes. It's just terrible.
Instead of them coming out as just as human beings, and you see something that's wrong.
That's right.
And the thing about it is these are guys that you're going to battle with. These are your teammates, man. These are your teammates. You know, forget about the color of them. These are your teammates.
Right.
You see how they're being treated, and you see things that's affecting their community.
Right.
And you can't, as a teammate or as a friend, you can't come out there and speak out about it. We were talking. It's so funny that Brandon brought that up because we were talking about that the other day, and I was even telling you about one time that we were in church some maybe a couple of years ago, and I think I don't know if this was around the same time as the Freddie Gray incident. It was one of the many incidents, right, where unarmed black men were killed by a police officer, but
Right.
a white police officer, but in that particular sermon. That pastor, I'm not going to put any names or anything out there, but he had a message for because he is a multicultural church, so he had a message for each group of people. And his message to white people was, your silence is almost like co-signing what's happening.
That's right.
You know, by just going in the corner and just hiding in the corner and not saying anything about what's going on.
Right. You have to address it. You have to speak out, and you have to support your fellow, brothers, sisters, and also whether you're the same race or not. We all in this thing together, and we can't allow racism and white supremacy to have the higher and the last laugh.
Very true.
We got to get on top of this.
Brandon, man, that was a really good point. We might need to spend some more time on that, even in our next episode. So, Boogie, I see what you said. MJ made everyone around him better, from starting five to the water boy. Okay. So see, he's giving MJ his props in terms of because a lot. What was the thing that everybody was saying about MJ before he won titles? He's worried about himself. All he can do is score, but he can't make guys around him better.
Yeah, that's what they used to say those early years. But he didn't have a whole lot he was working with. He had a couple decent players on the team. So once he started getting some pieces and obviously working with the ones that he had. And of course, once they incorporated that triangle offense, I think you saw a whole different ball game with the way they played as a team.
And then Brandon also made another good point. He said LeBron mentioned different ways of leadership to the way animals hunt. Each animal has a different way they attack. Same applies to athletes. Kobe, Mike, Magic all had different ways that they led. That's a good point.
Okay.
Because I've always said about LeBron, I'm not saying he's got anywhere near the same killer instinct that MJ had, but I still think that he is a killer on the basketball court in his own right. He's an assassin in his own right. He does it differently. I think just because MJ did it one way, I think it's wrong to totally discredit another great player because they're just a different type of great player.
Right. And one point I like Magic Johnson's leadership. He was somebody that could get the best out of players. And, the one thing about Magic, he had a couple superstars on his team as well, but he also had some role players, and he was able to make them shine bright. If you go back and look at some of those teams that the Lakers have. So we got to give props to Magic. I know a lot of times we overlook it, and all we want to talk about is Michael Jordan and LeBron James. But Magic Johnson was a bad dude, man, if you were able to look at some of the footage and see some of the things he was able to accomplish in the game of basketball.
Absolutely. Something that Frank said here, he said we got to give Bron his props. He's talking about when he took that team to the championship in I think it was 2007. When he had a Gauskas on his team, he had Boobie Gibson. He said, "Come on, you gotta give this man his props." I agree with that.
Oh yeah, he's a bad boy. Don't get me wrong. We're not taking anything away from him. But if you're comparing him to Michael, we have to be truthful about it.
Frank said that if Mike was on that team, he would have kicked the Gauskas out of practice.
You're probably right.
What did my man Brandon say? LeBron's best killer mode was during Miami. He's saying that so Brandon, you basically saying that you think that LeBron was in his best, like killer instinct mode when he was on the Heat. Is that what I think that's what you're saying there. Let me see.
Well, he had D Wade running alongside of him, man.
Drew?
When you got that deadly combination, man, you can feel good about what you're about to approach because those guys battle.
Oh, absolutely. Boogie said MJ's teammates work to get better. LeBron teammates work to not get traded.
Now get what?
He said, so basically he's saying that Mike's teammates were working to get better. Where LeBron's guys are just trying to do what they got to do not to get traded, because I guess he's trying to say to LeBron,
that's funny.
That's interesting. What else we got here? Uncle Todd, because we got a couple minutes left, so I'm trying to get to you all's comments. Got a lot of them. Uncle Todd said today the NBA players may be better physically fit. They might be more physically fit than the players of old, but the players back then were better fundamentally sound. Talk about that, Pops.
That's a good point, Todd. You better believe it, man. Those guys were fundamentally sound. You had more than pretty much probably 4 guys in that lineup probably could handle the ball and bring it down, outside of the center. And they moved the ball around. They set picks. They knew how to box out well to get rebounds, which I don't know. These guys nowadays don't know anything about boxing now.
It's a lot of hero
It just blows my mind to see when the ball goes up, instead of them getting in position to get the rebound, they look at the ball. And then once the ball hits, they hitting down the court. That's why Russell Westbrook will always get a whole bunch of triple doubles, because he always looks to get rebounds. When that ball goes up, you see him moving in his position. A lot of those guys, you don't see them doing that. So there's a lot of fundamentals that they've missed out on, mainly because they were just gifted in terms of their size and maybe their abilities. But I agree with that one, Todd.
Guys, listen, guys, man, we got about a minute and a half left. I just want to say we appreciate you guys, spending the last hour with us during Mother's Day. I know that's tough, but we got this series. This Last Dance series is not over.
Right.
We got 2 more, 4 more episodes, 2 more nights.
And I do want to draw attention quickly to the banner behind us.
You see this banner?
This is one when they won that 5th title.
Yep.
I went and ordered that thing immediately when I saw it go on sale.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to have it not just for me.
No.
But I bought it for my son.
No, this is mine. This is going back to New York with me.
No, I know that, but I'm saying I got it for my son. So I'm just going to send a message to some of you fathers out there. Don't be selfish, okay? Pass something on to your sons, because they can carry that torch.
And I was wondering where this went. I thought I had it in New York, but my brother had it at his school, man. He had took this, from the house and took it to school, but it's going back to New York with me. We got like 30 seconds, but this is like authentic. This was 97. My pops got this for me. I was 7 years old.
Worth a whole lot of money, guys. So don't be sneaking in Karl's spot, trying to take some of his valuables.
No, most of the people on here don't know where I live, and it's gonna stay that way. Guys, thanks for tuning in to episode 3 of Like Father Like Son. Tune in next week, but tonight, 9 p.m. you got part 7 and 8 of The Last Dance. Until next time, we gotta go, man.
Take care.
Appreciate you.
God bless.